The best Christmas gift would be if he just died. That sentence, calm, casual, delivered like a shopping list, didn't come from a stranger. It came from my son. My name is Harrison Lockwood, 62 years old, father of one, widower of Margaret. I thought I had already survived life's cruelest blows, the death of my wife, the long, lonely years that followed, but nothing compared to hearing my only child wish me gone. I was in the laundry room that night, stacking towels fresh from the dryer. Steam fogged the window. The machine rattled steady, a domestic rhythm masking the fracture about to split my life in two. Through the cracked door, I heard his voice. "Daniel, my son." His words were steady, almost bored. "Honestly, the best gift this year would be if he just died." The towel slipped from my hands. For a second, I prayed I had misheard, that the dryer's hum had warped the sound. But then Victoria, his wife, answered with a shrug in her tone. "You said it, not me." No one laughed. No one corrected. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. It was agreement. Daniel sighed. "It's exhausting having him here all the time. We can't keep doing this." My knees buckled, and I clutched the counter to stay upright. 4 years I had lived under their roof, in the in-law suite they called generous, in the house I paid for. I sold the home Margaret and I built, wired Daniel $150,000, and trusted his promise. "You'll always have a place here, Dad." That night, hearing those words, I realized what my place really was. Not father, not family, just a burden they wanted erased. I crept upstairs, each step heavier than the last, and shut the door to the room they never let me decorate. No lock, no privacy, just a shell of space for the ghost I had become. I pulled out the worn notebook from my drawer, flipped to a blank page, and wrote the words exactly as I heard them. The best Christmas gift would be if he just died. I stared at the sentence until the ink blurred. My hand didn't shake, my heart did. That was the night something inside me shifted. I sat on the edge of the bed that night, the words still echoing in my head. If he just died. My son's voice, steady, cold. Victoria's agreement, smooth, dismissive. Together they cut deeper than any wound I'd ever known. I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out an old photograph. Margaret on the porch of the house we built together. She wore her favorite blue sweater, her hair loose in the summer wind, smiling at me like I was the only man alive. 27 years married, 27 years of building, saving, raising Daniel. When cancer took her, I thought the hardest chapter of my life had closed. I was wrong. Back then, Daniel had cried into my shoulder, promising he'd take care of me the way I'd always taken care of him. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. So when his loan fell through and he begged me for help, I didn't hesitate. I sold that house, the one filled with Margaret's laughter, and I wired him $150,000. "You'll always have a place here, Dad," he said. His voice cracked with gratitude. I remember thinking Margaret would be proud of him, proud of me. 4 years later, I was a guest in the house my money bought, a guest with no keys, no say, and no respect. Victoria made sure of that. My old recliner, the chair I used to sit in while Margaret read on the couch, wasn't welcome. "It doesn't match the aesthetic," she said. None of my furniture was. Not the oak dining table, not the grandfather clock, not even the rug Margaret's mother wove by hand. All of it sold, donated, or locked away. The in-law suite became my cage. Off-white walls, a single dresser, a narrow bed. They called it my space, but it never felt like mine. I wasn't allowed to paint, to hang pictures, to lock the door. I lived at their mercy, tiptoeing through hallways, asking permission to use bathrooms when guests were over. I had become careful, invisible. I told myself it was worth it, for Daniel, for the grandkids. Emma and Noah would run in sometimes, climb on my lap, beg me to tell stories about their grandmother. For those moments, I swallowed Victoria's sighs, her eye rolls, her subtle digs about old people taking up space. I convinced myself family meant enduring discomfort. But that night, with the words written in my notebook, the illusion shattered. I remembered every check I'd slipped into Daniel's kitchen drawer when his hours were cut back, every grocery bill I covered, every quiet rescue I made so he wouldn't feel the sting of failure. I remembered watching him stand at the altar on his wedding day, tears in his eyes, calling me his hero. I remembered him clutching my hand at Margaret's funeral, whispering, "I can't do this without you, Dad." And now, 4 years later, I was too much for him to bear. The weight of it pressed on my chest. All those sacrifices, the house, the savings, the furniture, my freedom, they hadn't built a bond. They had built entitlement. My generosity had turned me into a ghost in his house, a ghost that folded towels, babysat kids, paid bills, and stayed out of the way. I sat there in the half-dark, the hum of the house settling around me. Downstairs, Daniel and Victoria moved through their lives as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just wished me gone. I thought of Margaret again. She used to warn me, "Harrison, don't confuse sacrifice with love. If you give everything, you'll leave nothing for yourself." I never listened. I thought giving was proof of love. I thought it was my duty as a husband, a father, a man. Now I saw the truth. My sacrifices hadn't built gratitude, they'd built dependence. My silence hadn't kept peace, it had fed resentment. That night, I realized something Margaret had understood long before me. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. I closed the notebook, placed it back in the drawer, and leaned against the headboard. My chest felt hollow, but inside that emptiness, a new thought sparked. I wasn't powerless. Not yet. The morning after, I sat at the kitchen island with a mug of lukewarm coffee. My stomach twisted, but I forced the cup to my lips, pretending nothing had changed. Daniel shuffled in, rubbing his eyes like a boy who'd overslept. "Morning," he muttered. I couldn't answer. If I opened my mouth, I might scream. He didn't notice. He never did. Victoria came in next, dressed head to toe in her matching workout set, scrolling her phone, acrylic nails tapping like a metronome. "You okay, Dad? You look pale," Daniel asked finally. "Just tired," I said. "You should try melatonin," Victoria added, eyes still glued to her screen. I wanted to laugh. Melatonin for the sickness of knowing your son wants you dead. Instead, I nodded. They moved around the kitchen like nothing had happened, like they hadn't broken me open the night before. Later, back in my room, I opened the drawer where I kept old envelopes, bills, notices, things I never looked at unless I had to. The top one bore the mortgage company's logo. I tore it open slowly. Past due. Not one payment, but 3. A cold weight settled in my chest. 3 months behind. I stood so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I went to the desk in the corner, opened my laptop, and logged into the account I had set up years ago, an emergency fund to help if things ever got tight. I hadn't checked it in months. The screen loaded, and my heart sank. Balance, $0. Thousands gone. Withdrawn in small, careful amounts. My son had been bleeding me dry, one transaction at a time. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. The house wasn't just mine financially, it was mine legally. But I wasn't just living here, I was funding them. Utilities, groceries, repairs, they had all come from me. Every dollar I thought was helping had only buried me deeper in their mess. Then I heard it. The front door opened downstairs. Voices floated up. Daniel's first, hushed but sharp. "That emergency account is empty. I checked this morning." Victoria's reply came quick. "What about the other one? The one he barely uses? The Christmas fund?" My fists clenched. "She's old school," Daniel said. "Still writes checks for everything. Maybe she won't notice if I pull a little. We're only talking a few hundred." "Then do it." "I'm not robbing my father." His voice rose, defensive. For a second I wanted to believe he meant it. But then his next words landed like a hammer. "I'll figure something else out." I backed away from the stairwell before they saw me, my pulse hammering in my ears. I returned to my room, shut the door, and opened the other account, the one Margaret had insisted I keep hidden. $24,500. Still untouched. Still mine. For the first time in years I felt a flicker of relief. Margaret had warned me. "Trust with your heart, Harrison, but guard your money." I hadn't listened. Until now. I paced the room, whispering to myself. "You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. They've been draining you." The numbers told the story. The missing thousands, the unpaid mortgage, the quiet desperation behind Daniel's smiles. All of it had been built on my silence. That evening, Daniel appeared in my doorway, wearing the same fake smile he'd used on me since boyhood. "Got a second, Dad?" "Sure," I said evenly. He leaned against the frame, casual. "Victoria and I were thinking after the holidays, maybe we should rearrange the finances. Make things smoother." "Smoother for who?" "For all of us," he said quickly. "I already handle most of the bills. It makes sense to consolidate. Put everything under one umbrella." My silence stretched long enough for him to shift uncomfortably. "I'll think about it," I said at last. "But that money is still mine." "Of course," he replied, smiling too fast. "No," I cut in. "You meant what you said, Daniel. And I heard every word." His face froze. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing," I said quietly. "I just need some air." I walked past him, out the front door, into the freezing December night. The cold bit into my skin, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that house. I walked the block twice, my breath rising in clouds, my heart beating steady for the first time in days. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was powerless. But they were wrong. I wasn't the one falling apart anymore. They were. And soon they'd know just how much power I still had. Back in my room, I pulled the old suitcase from the closet. Dust clung to the handle. I hadn't touched it since moving in 4 years ago. I unzipped the lining and slid out an envelope taped flat against the fabric. Margaret's handwriting stared back at me. Plan B. My throat tightened. She had insisted on it. Hope for the best, Harrison, but prepare for the worst. Even with family. I'd laughed then. Family was safe, I told her. Family was everything. She only smiled that knowing smile of hers. Now, holding that envelope, I hated how right she had been. I opened it carefully, like it might crumble. Inside lay copies of the co-ownership deed, notarized letters, and account records Margaret had forced me to keep separate. The proof that my name was still on the house. Proof Daniel had never bothered to remove me legally. For the first time in weeks, my hands were steady, not shaking with rage, not trembling with grief. Steady. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't dialed in years. Catherine Ward. She'd been Margaret's lawyer, then mine, a sharp woman with a mind like a steel trap. She answered on the third ring. "Harrison? It's been a while. Everything okay?" "No," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. "I need to know if the paperwork we filed years ago is still valid. The deed, with my name on it." "Of course. You never signed the removal. Daniel never filed it. Legally, you still own 45%. I closed my eyes. Relief didn't wash over me. It burned. I had leverage. I had power. "Why?" she asked softly. I took a breath and let the words spill. "Because my son and his wife want me gone. Not moved out. Gone. They've drained my accounts, missed 3 months of mortgage payments, and now they're circling my last savings like vultures. Catherine, they don't even hide it anymore." Silence stretched. Then her voice sharpened. "Harrison, listen to me. You are not trapped. You have legal standing here. You have power." "I don't want revenge," I said, though the word tasted tempting. "I want out, but on my terms." "Then we act," she said. "We'll draft a notice of intent to sell. That will force their hand. Either they buy you out or the house goes on the market." "Send it to both of them," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I want this to hit hard." "Tomorrow," she promised. When we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope still in my lap. The man I had been, the ghost folding towels, the ATM in the corner, was gone. Margaret's foresight had given me an escape hatch. My silence had been their shield. Now it would end. I packed slowly that night, not frantic, not panicked. Calm. 1 suitcase, 1 carry-on. Essentials only. A coat, 2 pairs of shoes, clean shirts, my passport tucked in the outer pocket. Every fold of fabric felt like closing a chapter. Every item I chose was proof that I wasn't clinging anymore. I zipped the suitcase, placed it by the door, and looked around the room one last time. Off-white walls, a dresser half empty, the ghost of a man who had endured too much. Tomorrow, I would stop enduring. Tomorrow, Plan B would become Plan A. Christmas Eve arrived, and the house felt colder than usual. Not from the weather, though the wind outside howled against the windows, but from the silence between us. I'd spoken with Catherine the night before. The notice was drafted, ready to be delivered. All that was left was for me to decide when to walk out. The decision came easier than I expected. That morning, the power shut off. No lights on the tree, no music, no fake fire crackling on the TV. Victoria slammed the fridge door, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This can't be happening. My mother is flying in from Boston tonight. We have guests tomorrow. Daniel, how could you let this happen?" "I thought," his voice faltered, I thought Dad was covering it. I stepped into the kitchen doorway, my suitcase still upstairs. Not anymore. They both spun to face me. Daniel's eyes wide, Victoria's lips pressed thin. "You told me the best gift would be if I disappeared," I said, my voice steady. "This is me disappearing, quietly, responsibly, out of your way." Victoria's face flushed crimson. "You can't just cancel payments without telling anyone." "You canceled me months ago," I replied. Neither spoke. I left them standing in the dark kitchen and went back upstairs. I opened the closet and pulled out 2 small boxes I had wrapped in brown paper. Inside each was a letter, one for Emma, one for Noah, and a small keepsake from Margaret's things. For Emma, her grandmother's silver locket. For Noah, the pocket knife Daniel once gave me as a boy. I wanted them to know their grandparents loved them, even if their parents had forgotten what love meant. I placed the boxes under the unlit tree. No ribbons, no glitter, just names written in bold marker. A final gift, the kind money couldn't erase. By late afternoon, Daniel and Victoria were arguing in the garage, their voices sharp and frantic. I carried my suitcase downstairs, wheels bumping softly against each step. My heart beat slow, calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fix their mess. I paused in the entryway. The tree loomed in the living room, dark and bare. The stockings hung limp, shadows instead of cheer. It looked like a stage set for a play about loss. And in a way, it was. At 5:30 a.m. on Christmas morning, I would leave for good. The hours crawled by. I lay in bed that night, suitcase by the door, my phone buzzing with updates from Catherine. The official notice had been sent, directly to Daniel's and Victoria's inboxes. Notice of intent to sell. Harrison Lockwood. I almost smiled imagining their faces when they opened it. Before dawn, I rose quietly, dressed, and wheeled my bag through the silent house. The floorboards groaned, but no one stirred. At the foot of the stairs, I stopped, hand resting on the front door. My chest tightened. Not with fear, but with release. I opened the door. A rush of icy air greeted me. Snow dusted the front steps, thin but enough to crunch under my shoes. The driveway stretched ahead, empty except for the waiting shuttle. The driver stepped out, helped me load the suitcase, and asked where I was headed. "Heathrow," I said. As the van pulled away, I looked back once. The house was dark, the tree in the window lifeless. That was their Christmas now, a hollow one, bought on lies, entitlement, and silence. Mine would be different. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself. The wheels touched down at Heathrow just past 3 in the afternoon. As the plane slowed, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not relief, not joy. Something steadier. Resolve. I carried my single suitcase through the crowded terminal, the holiday rush all around me. Families hugged, children tugged at their parents, travelers barked into phones. No one looked twice at me, and that anonymity was a gift. For years I had been scrutinized, measured, judged in my own son's house. Here I was just another man arriving in London. Edward Cross was waiting at arrivals. He spotted me first, his gray hair and wool coat making him easy to pick out in the crowd. "Harrison," he said warmly, gripping my shoulder. "Margaret would be proud of you for finally doing this." I didn't trust my voice, so I only nodded. He drove me through the city, past streets draped in Christmas lights, storefronts glowing despite the early dusk. The air outside the car was cold, damp, different. London air. A clean start. Edward's apartment was modest but comfortable. He handed me the keys without ceremony. "Stay as long as you need. No strings." 2 words I hadn't heard in years. No strings. That night I unpacked carefully. Just 2 drawers, 1 closet. Enough. I made tea, opened the window, and let the damp chill wash over me. Across the street, lights twinkled on balconies. Somewhere a couple laughed, their voices carried by the wind. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an intruder in someone else's life. The next evening I walked along the River Thames. The wind bit through my coat, but I welcomed it. My breath rose in clouds as I leaned against the railing and watched the water churn below, dark and restless. London pulsed around me. Buses rumbling across bridges, footsteps on wet pavement, the city alive in every direction. I wasn't a ghost here. I wasn't in the way. I was simply a man walking beside a river, free to belong or not belong on my own terms. Back at the apartment, my phone lit up. Missed calls. 5 from Daniel, 2 from Victoria. Voicemails stacked one after another. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I already knew the words. Excuses. Justifications. Pleas for money, dressed as apologies. I turned the phone face down on the table and poured a glass of wine. The silence in the apartment was different than the silence back in their house. That silence had been heavy, suffocating, filled with judgment. This silence was light, chosen, mine. Before bed, I opened a fresh notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote 1 sentence. What I will never do again. Under it, I listed 3 things. I will never beg to be respected. I will never mistake sacrifice for love. I will never bleed so others can thrive. I closed the notebook and slept better than I had in years. Over the next week, the calls didn't stop. They multiplied. Emails came too, subject lines shouting, "We need to talk. Please call us back." Urgent. I forwarded them all to Catherine with a single instruction. Handle everything through legal channels. Edward asked me once if I felt guilty leaving the kids behind. I told him the truth. Yes, I missed them. But I left them something better than money. Letters. Proof that love can be steady, even when people fail. One day they'll understand. London began to stitch me back together. Each morning, I walked further along the Thames, past bridges, markets, and monuments. Each evening, I returned to my small apartment, cooked for myself, and drank tea by the window. My life was stripped down, but it was mine again. And in that simplicity, I found something Daniel and Victoria would never understand. Freedom tastes better than approval. By the second week of February, the paperwork was finished. Catherine sent me the confirmation in a neat email. The house had been sold, debts settled, accounts cleared. My name was officially off everything. Daniel and Victoria would get what little remained. I would walk away clean. The finality of it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like stillness, like the air after a storm when the world holds its breath. My phone buzzed constantly in those days. Missed calls stacked higher than the emails. I ignored them all until one afternoon when Daniel's name appeared for the 5th time in a row. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You win," he said, his voice flat, tired. "We're moving into an apartment near Victoria's mother. The kids don't understand, neither do I. But I guess this is what we deserve." For once I didn't rush to comfort him. His pain wasn't mine to manage anymore. I gave you every chance, I said quietly. All I asked was respect. Instead, you drained me, dismissed me, and wished me gone. Now you got what you wanted. I'm gone. He tried to argue. We didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. You meant it enough to let her say it in front of you, and you didn't stop her. That was the moment I stopped being your father and became your burden. Silence hung heavy. Then he whispered, So that's it? You just abandon us? No, I said firmly. I'm holding you accountable. You built a life on my sacrifices, and when I stepped away, it collapsed. That's not abandonment. That's consequence. His breath hitched. What do you want from us? Nothing. That's the point. I ended the call before he could respond. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. That night, I sat by the window of Edward's apartment, the city lights shimmering across the River Thames. I opened my notebook and wrote a single word at the top of the page. Freedom. Beneath it, another. Finally. Days later, the final envelope arrived by courier. Inside were the closing documents, signed, stamped, irreversible. I read every line, then slid them into my carry-on. My chapter in that house, their house, was finished. As I zipped the bag, another message came through from Daniel. A voice note. I hesitated, then pressed play. You win, he repeated. We're selling furniture to stay afloat. Victoria's furious. The kids are confused. If this is what you needed, you got it. I just don't know how to fix it. I didn't reply, because it wasn't mine to fix anymore. The next morning, I boarded a train out of London. The station buzzed with travelers, the air sharp with the scent of coffee and iron. I found my seat, set my suitcase beside me, and watched the city blur past as the train pulled away. I thought of the man I used to be, the ghost in the house he paid for, the father who kept folding towels in silence. That man was gone. He didn't just leave. He evolved. I thought of Emma and Noah. I missed them. That ache would never fade. But I left them something better than money. Letters, keepsakes, proof of love that outlives betrayal. One day they would understand that boundaries aren't cruelty. They are survival. I opened my notebook one last time. On the final page, I wrote, I didn't just walk away. I walked toward myself. I stared at the words, then added one more line beneath them. Let them learn from the echo of my absence. As the train rolled forward, so did I. Not toward revenge, not toward regret, but toward peace, the kind you earn, not the kind you beg for.